What's going on, gardeners? It's Saturday, May 7th, and it is starting to get very warm here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, and the plants are really starting to demand a lot of water. So now I'm going to do something that I've been wanting to do for a year now. I'm going to run drip irrigation to all of my container garden plants, and this will be part of my drip irrigation series that I will link down in the playlist below. So I'm going to show you how to run drip irrigation to a container garden right now. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon storefront and spread shop in the video description for a list of the gardening products I use and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated. When it comes to building drip irrigation systems, there are a lot of individual parts and they can be quite confusing because there's so many. So for your convenience, I have opened up an affiliate store with Drip Depot, which is where I purchased all of my drip irrigation parts. So you can click that Drip Depot link in the video description, and that will take you to a storefront that has all of the different part names for your convenience. If you need smaller quantities, you can also check out my Amazon storefront link in the video description, where some of the fittings in smaller quantities can be purchased as well. When I originally showed you how to run drip irrigation to my main garden, of which I will link to above, I set it up in 3 different zones, and you can see all 3 zones here. The first zone in the middle run to all of my rectangular beds in the garden. The zone over to the right run to the perimeter beds that encompass the perimeter of my entire garden. And then over here to the left, I have this spare zone which has one of these shutoff valves right here. And the purpose of this zone I left open because I always intended to run it over to my container garden over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug the main line tubing into that zone and run it over to my main container garden area right in front. We are going to feed our drip irrigation system with 1/2-inch polyethylene drip irrigation tubing, and that actually has an inner diameter of 0.6 inches and an outer diameter of 0.7 inches despite the 1/2-inch name. The best thing that you want to do is you want to set this out on a hot sunny day and put bricks on it to hold it in place, because it will be very firm and hard to work with at room temperature. But when you sit it out in the sun, that distribution tubing, that main line, will become very soft and pliable, and it will take all of the kinks out of it. So I have pre-cut everything to the lengths that you see, and I cut everything a couple feet longer than I need them to be, so I have a little bit of play in the system. Now that they've been sitting out in the sun for about an hour, they are nice and soft and easier to work with. The reason why I wound up going with Drip Depot as the manufacturer for my drip irrigation tubing is because they have these really awesome and convenient twist style Permalock couplings, and I think they're awesome because not only are they very strong, but they are also removable, which adds a lot of versatility to the system. There are a lot of different manufacturers out there. I'm not telling you that you have to go with Drip Depot or even that you should, but for me, I thought they were the best choice, and I love their product. So now that we have this main distribution line connected, I'll show you how I have it run to my container garden. So I connected the main line tubing over to that 3rd zone that I had reserved for this drip irrigation container garden system, and then I ran the main tubing all the way over past each individual trellis that I have built, and I'm going to place one of those shutoff valves for each individual trellis. That way I can control each individual trellis as its own zone. And I am going to, I ran the mainline tubing all the way over to this garden TP right here, because that is going to be another zone on the drip irrigation system. That way, if I only want to water the garden TP, I will be able to open and close the valve at will. And if I only want to water the plants on one of these T-post trellis that I just showed you how to build, of which I'll link to above, I'll be able to do that as well. Now that the mainline distribution tubing has been run, I'm going to use a series of different fittings in order to make the container drip irrigation system. And these fittings right here, these are all compression couplings and elbows that will be used in order to connect and place bends inside the mainline distribution tubing. These are hose ends. They will cap the ends of each mainline tubing run. I'll also be using these shutoff valves to create separate zones in the drip irrigation system so I can turn off individual main lines. Once I have all the main lines run, I'll be using this 1/4-inch vinyl tubing, which will be tapped off the main line using these barb style fittings right here that we will puncture a hole in the main line with. And we will do that using this punch tool right here. And then what we will be doing is we'll be using these drip emitters right here. We will be building our distribution line to each individual container. It'll have basically a barb style fitting, a piece of the 1/4-inch vinyl tubing, and then the drip emitter on the end. And then once it's all done, we'll wind up using these galvanized stakes to lock the main line into place so it won't get moved around. And that is going to be the core of our system. Obviously, you'll have to buy all of the parts that you need to make your unique design work in your yard. I just finished building the first distribution main line to my first trellis, and I want to show you exactly how I went about doing this. I first intercepted the main distribution line that I ran throughout my container garden, and then I placed this T fitting right here to intercept it. And I cut that main distribution line, and I put in the T fitting, and I ran my distribution line that attaches to the trellis. Then I put one of these shutoff valves here so I can manually control whether or not irrigation goes to this individual trellis. Then I came all the way up top to where I have my first cable trellis, which I put there on purpose to hold this distribution line, and I put a 90-degree fitting on there, and I zip tied it all together so it would be stationary and strong affixed to this T-post, and then I hammered this little galvanized stake into the ground to hold everything in place. After the 90-degree bend, I then zip tied the main distribution line to this stainless steel cable that I have run as the lower part of my trellising system, and I ran that main line throughout the entire trellis. It's a little hard to see with my fig trees being so thick and dense, but you can see it much better over here. I probably need to put another zip tie there because it's not holding very well. Then you can see zip tie, zip tie, zip tie, and this runs all the way down on the lowest guide cable all the way to the end of the trellis system. And then at the end of the trellis system, I put on one of these end caps right here. So I'm going to puncture this distribution line and then put individual drippers in every single container. And that is how I'm going to run drip irrigation to all of my potted plants. Now that I showed you what I did, I'm going to physically build it in front of you for this second trellis right here, which has no obstruction, so it'll be easy and clear to see. Now we're going to build the distribution line to the second trellis. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this main distribution line and I'm going to pull it up snug against the T-post. And I'm going to cut it because I want to insert this T-fitting right here. And I want the T-fitting to kind of lock into place in between these little ridges on the T-post. So I always like to cut my, my distribution line too long to start, because this is an iterative process where I can just slowly cut more and more of the line off until I get to the exact position that I want it to be. Remember, you can't add line, but you can always remove some, so be conservative with your cuts. You don't have to get it right and perfect the first time. So this looks to be about where I want it to be, and actually that is just perfect. So now that I've tightened the T and everything is exactly where I want it to be, I'm going to take a small piece of distribution tubing and press it into the top part. And now that that's been tightened, I'm going to cut this because I want to install one of those shutoff valves. Now we're going to press on one of those shutoff valves, press on another piece of tubing. Now that this line has been run and it is well up above the stainless steel cable that I'm going to mount the drip irrigation to, I'm going to cut it a little bit below that. But again, I'm going to be conservative here because I can always cut a little bit more off. I need to stick one of these 90-degree fittings to angle it over to this galvanized cable. So as you can see, I cut it way too long on purpose. So let's press on our 90-degree fitting. And that gets me right underneath that stainless steel cable, which is exactly where I want it to be. So now that it's exactly where I want it to be, I'm going to start zip tying it into place because I want to make sure that I hold everything pressed firmly up against this T-post. And the key here is to take your time and make sure that everything is straight. The nice thing about these compression fittings are if things aren't perfectly straight, you could always loosen them and then readjust. And that's exactly what I'm doing here to make sure that the 90-degree bend is just where I want it to be. Now we're going to mount the main distribution line on the guide cable. And if you don't have a guide cable like I do, you can just place the main distribution line directly onto the ground. I'm going to get it up off the ground because it's less of a thing to trip over. So if you have a trellis like I do, I think it's a good idea to elevate it a little bit. If you can't, don't worry about it. It's not mandatory. So once that elbow has been tightened, I'm going to start using smaller zip ties in order to tie it to the stainless steel cable. And you don't want to make it so tight that you're going to compress the distribution main line. You only really need it tight enough so it won't wiggle around in the wind and it'll be on there nice and firmly. Now the distribution main line has been run to my second trellis and everything is exactly where I want it to be. So it's time to lock it in place with this garden staple right here so nothing winds up being moved around, and I want to keep it secured to the ground so I don't trip over anything. In the meantime, I also installed another shutoff valve right here, which is running to my garden TP because I want to be able to isolate that because I'll only have plants growing over there in the spring and the summer during the warm season. So for the rest of the year, I want to be able to shut it off. Now you can see the final product of what the distribution main line looks like on this empty trellis. One thing I did differently here was I put another shutoff valve right here, and that's because this first section right here in between the first T-post and the first shutoff valve, I'm going to have my container citrus sitting there, and they require irrigation all year because they're evergreens. Behind it, I'm mostly going to have deciduous trees, and they really only need drip irrigation in the heat of the summer because for the other half of the year, they're dormant and the winters are wet enough that I never need to water because the evaporation rate is so low. So I want to be able to shut off this back portion when I want. And as you can see, just like the first distribution main line that I showed you running on my trellis, it goes all the way to one of these end caps. And that right there is a complete installation. The last thing I'm going to do is run one more line over to those big containers by my garden teepee. Now I'm going to show you how to install drippers to each individual container. But before we can install the drip emitters, we have to check the main line for leaks and also flush it out to clear out any sediment that may be in the main line. So right now the main line is on and I'm checking every single connection for leaks and I don't see any, which is a very good sign. These compression fittings, these twist lock, permalock fittings are great because they're so good at resisting leaks. So this is how I also have everything ran over to my garden trellis as well. Then you'll see I have the caps off all of the tubing because I'm going to flush the lines clean. So let's first open that one. Whoa, you can hear all the water pressure run and you can clearly see that the mainline tubing is flushing out. So we don't need to run a whole lot of water through there. We don't really need to waste the water just to clean everything out. We're going to do the same thing to this line, and that should hopefully cause a massive eruption to shoot out, and there it goes. So that should probably be about enough to flush out the main line. So let's close this, and then we're going to go over here and we're going to attempt to do the exact same thing, and we should see the same eruption happen over here. Oh, there it goes. Everything's looking good in the distance back there. So now all the main lines are cleaned out, so we are just going to replace the caps and then start hooking up the drip emitters. Now under normal circumstances, the way that I would run drippers to each individual plant would be to take one of these drip emitters, which I'm using 1/2 gallon per hour drip emitters for my container garden. You can use the size that you see fit. You would take the drip emitter, press it into one of the pieces of 1/4-inch vinyl tubing and put one of these barbs on the end, and this barb is what would attach to one end of the drip tube, and then you'd punch a hole in the mainline distribution tube and insert the other end. The reason why I'm not going to do this is because I have to punch a lot of holes because I have so many different plants to feed, and I don't want to punch that many holes in the mainline distribution tubing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a double connection using one of these T's, so I only have to punch half as many holes. So I'm going to press one end of the 1/4-inch vinyl tubing into one side of the T. I'm going to press the other end into the other side of the T, and then I'm going to press a drip emitter on each side, just like that. And it's important that once you press them in, once the barb goes in, you want to pull out just a little bit because that'll help create a better seal. Now that I have 2 drip emitters built into one barb, I'm going to then press a hole into the distribution tubing using this tool and attach, and I'll show you how to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a point right in the center of my 2 containers that I'm going to run the drippers to, and then I'm going to grab the distribution tubing and I'm going to use the hole punch tool, and I'm going to punch it underneath the drip tubing. And remember, we flushed this out so some water might come out. Then after that hole has been punched, we're going to insert the barb and pull out very gently. Then we're going to take one of these micro drip stabilizers from Drip Depot, and we are going to stabilize the drippers so they drip roughly in the center of the container. And just like that, we're able to run 2 drippers to 2 containers with one single hole punch. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to every single one of my containers. Well, it has been a long afternoon setting everything up, but it is finally done, and I can't wait to show you the final results because I am just thrilled with the way that this turned out. You can see how all the drippers they are just working great inside these containers. Every single one of them has a dripper, and again, these are 1/2 gallon per hour drippers that are going to work there. And this is going to save me so much time. No more manually hand watering, none of that. And that is just fantastic. And I'm also going to have these hooked up to my rain barrel, so I will be able to mix soluble fertilizers in there as well, and that is going to be tremendously helpful as well. That will be a video for another day that I intend to have upcoming. I also moved all of my fig seedlings here, which I haven't hooked up drippers to yet because they're so small they're not demanding a whole lot of water yet. But I may hook up some kind of even smaller dripper to these, maybe something like drip line, since it won't drip as aggressively as a drip emitter. Then oops, I spoke too soon. I just had a drip emitter blow off on me, so this is why you have to check the system over. But this is also why I installed one of these shutoff valves right now, because every now and again things like that can happen. So let me fix that. We recut the vinyl tubing and we reset the emitter, and everything is good now. So really happy with the way everything turned out. And what's great about isolating all my citrus and coffee here is they require much less water than the figs, and they do better being kept a little drier. So that's why I wanted them on a completely different drip system. As for the smaller figs, they will again require much less water, so I will be able to basically keep similar classes of plants together. And I mentioned that I used 1/2 gallon per hour drippers for the trellis over here by the teepee. Because I'm watering much larger grow bags, I used 1 gallon per hour drippers. So these will wet these much larger bags down at double the rate. So the green ones are 1 gallon per hour. You can see the drip emitters in the bags with the potatoes. So they are going to water these much larger grow bags at a much more aggressive rate. So that was my logic for doing things the way I did. And obviously your mileage may vary. You're going to want to do things a custom design for your specific setup. Most people aren't as crazy as me and have quite the container garden like this, so it'll probably be a lot less work for you to set up your container area than mine. And that right there is everything you need to know about how to install a complete drip irrigation system to a container garden. Now, as I said before, there were a lot of different parts that I used in this video, and there are plenty more out there that you may need to customize your own drip irrigation installation. So please check the video description for my Drip Depot storefront, my affiliate store, which will have all of these different items that I used classified for you for your convenience and ease of finding, as well as check out my Amazon storefront link in the video description as well, in case you need smaller quantities of other easier to find parts. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you're notified when we release more videos like these. If you have any questions about the install, please ask them in the comments below, and I will do my best to try and answer them. As I mentioned, check out the Drip Depot and Amazon storefronts in the video description for parts and other things I use in my garden. And while you're there, check out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. All right, Dale, time to get some freshly picked treats. These are so good. Gentle. Oh, Dale and I just love sugar snap peas. Well, we could just sit here. We could eat them all day. Let's get another one. Here's another one here. Ready, mister? Gentle. Oh. Delicious. Delicious, buddy. How about another one? One for me, one for you. Let's try to get a really, really nice big full one here. Ooh. See, Dale, the fuller they are, the better. One for Dad and one for Dale. Good boy. Good boy, Mr. Handsome.